In my video, Double Loop Learning and Mental Models, I described how systemic intelligence, also known as SysQ, builds high-leverage mental models, the kind of mental models we need to address wicked, complex VUCA issues. These are issues I label as adaptive challenges. SysQ mental models contain two components. One, the behavior you want to influence, change, and improve, and two, the structure responsible for generating that behavior. But knowing these are the two components is insufficient to guide you in assessing a mental model's usefulness. This video describes a rubric you can apply to assess the usefulness of any SysQ analysis. And it may surprise you, it's not the typical devils in the details type assessment. The secret to useful mental models lies in assessing two dimensions, breadth and depth. These are two dimensions that describe, one, how wide to cast the net, and two, how deep to trawl. Let's start by first saying that any mental model can fall along a continuum of breadth. In this case, breadth concerns two elements, time and space. On the narrow end of the continuum, time and space are compressed. This is the place of the here and now. Temporally, I only see what's in this moment. A narrow time dimension is being stuck in the immediacy of the present. When we fixate on events, we succumb to narrow temporal boundary thinking. Narrow spatial breadth is only what I see or am familiar with at the present. This is the typical I only see what's in front of my face. From an organizational perspective, narrow spatial boundaries means I focus only on what's within my silo. I only apply an accounting lens, or I only think about the impacts on production, or perhaps I only think about the sustainability measures. In academia, when I focus only on my discipline, I succumb to narrow spatial boundary thinking. I only apply macroeconomics, or I only apply international relations. Note, even if my discipline is a macro discipline, like those two, I can still narrowly focus only on that discipline. The broad end of the spectrum is the opposite of the above. A mental model over here would think about historical trends. How has this issue been evolving, trending over the past 5 years, 10, 20? What is the potential future if that trend continues? And what's the price paid if it keeps going in that direction? In terms of spatial breadth, I work with others across silos to better understand how R&D interacts with production, interacts with the supply chain, and interacts with customer satisfaction, and more. Or I think about how a multidisciplinary approach might help understand the issue. How is this issue understood using macroeconomics, social psychology, social determinants of health, science, the environment? The depth dimension also falls along a continuum. One end of the continuum is deeply disaggregated. This is where the details fall, and where we talk about the devils in the details. And in academia, this is exactly where a PhD usually lands. Take one aspect of an issue within a specific discipline and dive even deeper into the next unanswered academic question. If you're working on issues related to staff, this is where you apply an everyone is unique and needs a unique solution type thinking. Unless you're a sole proprietor, unique solutions for everyone leads to massive headaches. The other end of the continuum is highly aggregated. This is taking the 50,000 foot, 30,000 meters view of the issue. This is where Ron Heifetz would say you're getting up on the balcony. Up here you can see larger patterns. Rather than 30 different market segments, you analyze 2 or maybe 3. Rather than every individual part you order for production, you think about the 5 major components and how the supply chain works from there. And rather than all types of non-renewable resources, you first lump them all together into a stock of non-renewable resources. We can place these two dimensions as 2 different axes to create this graphic. The lower left contains highly detailed mental models focused narrowly in time and space. As mentioned before, our training, especially for the academically oriented, leads most of us to develop models down to the left. Good systems models are in the upper right. These see the long-term patterns and trends. They are at a high enough level of aggregation that we can generate useful decision rules, identify high-leverage strategies. This diagram was first developed by my colleague Barry Richmond to teach system dynamics modeling at Dartmouth College. He told his students there are 2 paths to move from the lower left quadrant to the upper right. Let's call path 1 the well-worn path. When traveling the well-worn path, we try to integrate everything all subject matter experts know about the issue. We seek to create the kitchen sink mental model. What is implicitly behind the kitchen sink mental model is that everything's important and that we need to build a model of the system. As I have mentioned in other videos, I no longer use the term systems thinking precisely because it leads people to think they are modeling the system. They confuse systems thinking with managing a system. It's not. Systems thinking should be about applying a systemic approach to building understanding. That would be the capacity of systemic intelligence. If our end goal is to build a model of the system, we naturally believe we need to assemble everything in that system into our mental models. This creates a never-ending process that, as that implies, never ends. If you've ever been involved in a process that lumbered on for months or years but never finished, you may have been involved in a model of the system project. The other approach is to immediately rise up out of the detail. Develop a purpose statement that looks at how big forces in the ecosystem contribute to issues you wish to understand and improve. I'll give more information in future videos on how to write a good purpose statement to get up out of the weeds. But for now, it's sufficient to know that a good purpose statement should include the behavior you wish to understand and influence, and the structure responsible for that. By rising up out of the weeds into seeing the big picture, we can then add detail to the mental model, move down into a slightly more disaggregated mental model as needed, but moving over into the broadest time and space view as possible to where the good systems models live. We do this by following the SysQ process. 1. Write a systemic purpose statement. 2. Develop appropriate trend graphs to describe and revise that purpose. 3. Apply an interactive mapping process to describe causal relationships. 4. Use stocks and flows first if you can, then add feedback loops. 5. Develop simulation models too, if inclined. And 6. Engage others in the learning process. As Ron Heifetz says, someone exercising leadership is orchestrating the process of getting factions with competing definitions of the problem to start learning from one another. My corollary: high SysQ leadership engages others in a learning process to generate high leverage systems mental models. In addressing supply chains, my video on supply chains and inflation is an attempt at providing a high leverage systems mental model around a challenge all of us experience daily. And a future video will describe how to see the interconnections between climate change, rising authoritarianism, weakening of judicial systems, and polarization. In conclusion, your rubric for assessing a mental model's usefulness: 1. Does the mental model have extensive enough breadth to capture the boundaries? And 2. Is the mental model at the most aggregated level possible out of the weeds? And are these sufficient to meet the purpose and what's needed to find leverage? Your choice is between following the more traveled path and attempt building a mental model of the system, or follow the road less traveled, the path to systems insight. As Barry Richmond said about the more traveled road, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. My advice to you: take the high road. Take the road less traveled.